The room was full and nobody was breathing. 140 people in their good clothes, holding champagne they had forgotten to drink, and at the front of the Magnolia Room an old man sat alone at a piano. The management had already sold. His hands were not moving yet. They rested on the keys the way a man rests a hand on the shoulder of someone he is about to say goodbye to. The lights were low and gold. Outside the tall windows the city went on with its traffic and its rain, and inside a single chord had not yet been struck, and still nobody was breathing. Against the back wall, where the staff was supposed to stand, a woman in a grey hotel uniform pressed herself flat. She had a folded cloth napkin in her hand, because she had been clearing tables 90 seconds ago, before the whole room went quiet on its own. Her name was Odessa, and for 3 years she had given this man $3 every Friday, and she had never once heard him play the thing he was about to play. She thought it would be the last song. She was wrong about that, in a way that would take the rest of the night to come clear. Booker lifted his hands an inch off the keys. The man who had ordered the piano, hauled out by Monday, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, certain he knew exactly how this would go. He had no idea. None of them did. To understand how a $3 tip ended up holding a man's whole life together, you have to go back 3 years to a Friday when Odessa Hartwell walked into the Magnolia Room for her first dinner shift and heard a piano playing to nobody at all. The Magnolia Room was the restaurant inside the old Cara Hotel downtown, the kind of place that had been grand in 1962 and had spent every year since slowly forgetting it. Brass that needed polish, carpet worn pale down the center aisle. A coffered ceiling so high the heat never reached it, and in the corner, on a low platform, a black baby grand piano with a man behind it in a jacket pressed so many times the seams had gone shiny. Odessa was 41 and starting over, which is a thing nobody chooses on purpose. She had spent 11 years at a fabric plant 2 towns east, and when the plant closed, she had learned that nobody hires a 41-year-old with 11 years of doing one thing. The hotel hired her because the hotel was always hiring. She had a daughter, Junie, who was 9, a 1-bedroom apartment where Junie got the bedroom and she got the pull-out, and a checking account she balanced in her head all day long like a song she could not stop humming. That first Friday, the dining room was 3/4 empty. A convention of orthodontists had taken the ballroom and ignored the restaurant, and the old man at the piano played anyway. He played as if the room were full, something slow and turning a melody that climbed and then thought better of it and came back down gentle, and Odessa stood by the service station with a tray of waters going warm in her hands and listened to a man pour everything he had into a room that was not listening. When her shift ended, she had $11 in tips and a daughter to feed and a long bus ride home. On the way out, she stopped at the platform where the old man was packing his sheet music into a soft leather case gone grey at the corners. Up close, he was older than the lights had let him look, 70 at least, close-cropped white hair and a white moustache trimmed straight across and hands knotted at the knuckles in a way that should have made playing hurt. "That was beautiful," she said, "what you were playing." He looked up at her, surprised, the way a man looks when he has decided the room cannot see him. "Thank you," he said. "Most folks don't notice. I noticed." She reached into her apron and took out 3 of her $11 3 soft singles and set them on the corner of the piano. It was not a thing she could afford. She knew the exact shape of what those $3 were, what they would have been by Sunday. A half-gallon of milk and most of a loaf of bread. She set them down anyway. The old man looked at the money, then at her, and something moved across his face that she would spend 3 years learning the meaning of. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," said Odessa. "That's kind of the point." His name was Booker. He had played in that room, he told her later, for 19 years, 6 nights a week, when there had been 6 nights of music, then 4, then 2, and now the one Friday. They kept him on because the hotel manager, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Adler, who had hired Booker himself, back when the room was something, could not bring himself to cut the last night. He was paid for the Fridays, and nothing else, and he went home after to a house he had shared with his wife until she passed, 4 years before Odessa ever heard him. So began the thing this whole story turns on, and it was so small you could have stood in that room every Friday for a year and never seen it. At the end of her shift, Odessa walked to the piano and put $3 on the corner. 3. Not because 3 was nothing, but because 3 was something she could just barely give, and she had decided the giving had to cost her, or it did not count. Some Fridays it was the worst $3 in the world to part with. The Friday the car needed a battery, the Friday Junie shoes split down the side, and the new ones were $40. Odessa did not have. On those nights, her whole body told her to keep her money, and she set it down anyway, and Booker would stop playing for one breath and say, "Thank you, Odessa," and play on. She never knew what those $3 did. She thought she was being kind to a lonely old man, and she was, but she was also doing something much larger, and it would be a long time before anybody told her so. Here is what she did not know. Booker had nearly quit. The winter before Odessa came, his wife 11 months gone, and the house too quiet and his hands hurting worse every cold month, he had decided that the Friday after New Year's would be his last. He had told no one. A man can decide a thing like that very quietly. He would play one more Friday, then call Mr. Adler and say his hands were done, and go home to the silent house and be an old man who used to play piano. Then a woman in a grey uniform put $3 on the corner of his piano and said the giving was the point. He did not quit that January. He told himself he would quit in the spring. By spring, there was a thing he looked forward to. A small, standing appointment with being seen, and a man will hold on a long time for the feeling of being seen by one person who means it. He kept the $3 in a coffee can on the counter and never spent them. By the second year, there were a great many soft singles in that can, and he would stand in his kitchen and understand he was looking at the reason he was still alive, in any way that counted. He never told Odessa, "You do not tell someone they are the rope you are holding, it is too much weight to hand a person." So he just said, "Thank you," every Friday, and let her think it was a tip. Then the Caro was bought because nothing stays still long enough to be left alone, least of all an old hotel that is losing money. A company that owned 40 hotels in 9 states bought it, and they sent a man. His name was Garrett Pyle, and he was 36, and he walked through a building like he was already calculating its salvage value. He came to fix the Caro, by which the company meant make it profitable, by which Garrett meant cut. He was not a cruel man in the way of villains. He was something more ordinary and more dangerous, a man who had learned to see people as line items, who had been rewarded for it his whole career, and who therefore believed, all the way down, that the kindest thing he could do was the efficient thing. He walked the Magnolia Room on a Tuesday afternoon when it was empty and the piano sat covered. He turned in a slow circle and saw $40,000 a year in a room that earned a fraction of that. A coffered ceiling that needed $30,000 in restoration. A baby grand an appraiser had told him was worth $18,000 to the right buyer. And on the schedule taped inside the host stand, a line that read, "Friday, Booker Green, piano," with a weekly rate beside it. "Who's this?" he asked the assistant manager, tapping the line. "That's Booker. He's played here forever." "Forever's not on the budget," Garrett said, not unkindly. The way another man might say it's supposed to rain. He took a photo of the schedule with his phone. "Let's talk about the room." What the plan came together over the next 2 weeks, and it was a good plan if you did not look at it too closely. The Magnolia Room would be gutted and reborn as a cocktail lounge, with a sound system instead of a stage and a curated playlist instead of a man. Because a playlist does not age and does not get sick and does not need to be paid every Friday whether the room is full or not. The piano would be sold and the platform pulled out. Garrett would put a number on a report, the number would be better than the last, and that was the whole of what the company would ever know about the room. Mr. Preed, Adler, who had hired Booker 19 years before, fought it the only way a soft-spoken old hotel manager can fight anything, quietly and without winning. He said the room had a history. Garrett said history was the most expensive thing a hotel could own. Mr. Adler said the man had been here 19 years. Garrett said, and he meant it as a kindness, then he's due for a rest. 2 weeks later, Adler took an early retirement he had not exactly chosen, and the last person in that building who remembered why the piano mattered cleaned out his desk, and on Friday, Booker played to a room that did not know it had just lost its only friend. Garrett told Booker himself because he believed in telling people himself. He thought it was honest. He found the old man on a Friday at the end of his shift packing the soft grey case and shook his hand and said the room was being renovated and that, regrettably, the new concept would not include live piano. He said it cleanly. He had said it many times before, in many rooms. "We'll honor your rate through the closing," Garrett said. "You've got 6 more Fridays. I want you to know the company appreciates your years here." Booker listened with his hands folded on top of the grey case. He did not argue. He had watched the room empty out over 19 years, and had always known that one day someone would do the arithmetic out loud. He only asked one thing. "Could I have the last one?" he said. "The last Friday. Could I have the room that night?" Garrett did not understand the question. "It's your shift," he said. "Of course." "No," said Booker. "I mean the room. I'd like to play a real night. Let it be full one time before you take the piano out." Garrett almost said no, because a full room on a closing night meant overtime and a bar to stock and staff to pay. Then he did the math a different way and saw that a full bar on the last night meant the closing would land in the black instead of the red, and he liked a number that ended in the black, so he said yes as a concession. He thought he was giving the old man a gift. He was, but not the gift he thought, and not to the man he thought. Odessa heard about it the way the staff heard about everything in the kitchen between orders. The room was closing. Booker was done. The piano was sold. 6 more Fridays and then a sound system and a cocktail menu and a name nobody would remember by spring. She found him that night at the piano and did not know what to say, so she said the true thing, which is usually the only thing worth saying. "I heard," she said. "I'm so sorry, Booker." He nodded. He looked older than she had ever seen him. 19 years, he said. "I thought I'd play here till I couldn't anymore. Turns out somebody else gets to decide when I can't." "It isn't right, no," he agreed. "But it's how it goes." He looked at the $3 she had just set on the corner, the way he always did, and for the first time in 3 years, he did not say thank you right away. He looked at the money a long time. "You ever wonder," he said, "why I never spent these?" She had not known. He never spent them. "You kept them, every one." He said it quietly. 3 years of Fridays. "They're in a can on my counter." She could see him deciding whether to say more. Then he shook his head, like a man putting down something too heavy to carry across a room, and said only, "You don't know what they were worth, that's all. You'll never know." She thought he meant the money. She would understand, much later, that he had not meant the money at all. Now the 6 Fridays began to count down, and the weeks in between are where the story almost went, the way these stories usually go, quietly and sadly and into the dark. Booker stopped sleeping. He had a piece of music he had been writing for 4 years, since the winter his wife passed, and he had never finished it because he had never known how it ended. Some nights he sat at the upright and played the parts he had, and stopped at the place where the music asked a question he could not answer, and he sat in the silence after, an old man with knotted hands, and could not find the last of it. He decided he would play it on the last Friday, finished or not, the one thing that was truly his after 19 years of playing other men's songs, even if it ended on a question. And he told no one, because that is how Booker carried everything. Meanwhile, Garrett ran his closing the way he ran everything, on a spreadsheet. He scheduled the renovation crew. He confirmed the buyer for the piano, a collector 2 states over, who would send a truck the Monday after the last Friday. And because he was a careful man who did not like surprises, he made one more decision about the last night that he did not announce to anyone, and it is the decision that turns this story. So hold on to it. He decided that the last Friday not really be Booker's night. It would be a soft preview of the new lounge. He scheduled the new playlist to run through the bar speakers between sets and told the staff privately that if the old man's playing dragged or the room got sleepy, they were to bring up the house music and keep the bar moving, because the point of a full room was a full till. And sentiment did not go in the till. He even had the audio company run a line so the house system could override the room, at the touch of a panel behind the bar. A backup. A man who plans for the room to go quiet is only being responsible. He did not believe, you understand, that the old man could fill that room. He had heard Booker play once on a walk through a few soft bars to a covered dining room and had thought, politely, that it was the sound of a thing that was over. He expected the last Friday to be 20 regulars and a slow night and a tasteful eulogy for a room nobody had loved enough to save. The override behind the bar was insurance against an old man's sad little failure. He did not know what Odessa knew, which was that a man who plays as if the room is full will, given one true night, make it so. Because Odessa did a thing in those 6 weeks that nobody asked her to do. She told people. She started with her own tables, the regulars who came for the Friday fish, the orthodontists who came back twice a year, the couple from the bank who had their anniversary dinner in the room every June. She told them while she refilled their water that the piano man was playing his last night, that he had played in that room for 19 years, that he had a song of his own he was finally going to play, and that they should come. She did not oversell it. She just said the true things the way Booker played, as if the room were already full. She told the choir director from her own church, a woman named Lucille, who had a voice like a furnace and knew everyone. She told the nurses who came off the late shift and ate at the bar, and the retired teacher 2 doors down who had not been out at night in a year. She pinned a card to the board at the laundromat. Last night of live piano at the Caro. Come hear Booker Green play. She did not put her own name on it. And here is the thing she did not plan, because she was not a woman who planned to be important. The people she told other people. The bank couple told their whole office. Lucille told the choir, and the choir told their families, and a man in the choir who taught music at the community college told his students that an old hotel pianist with 19 years in the same room was playing his last night and his own composition, and that they should go and learn something about what it costs to play to a roomful of strangers' backs for 19 years and still mean it. By the second week before, the thing had a momentum of its own, and Odessa had no idea how far it had travelled. She thought she had told 40 people. She had told 400. What she did not know, what nobody knew, was who one of those 400 would turn out to be. 2 weeks before the last Friday, Booker collapsed. It was nothing dramatic. He stood up too fast from the upright and the world tilted, and he went down and cracked his elbow on the bench, and he lay on the floor of his quiet house a while before he could get up, and when he got up, his right hand would not close all the way. The doctor said it was his heart, a little, and his blood pressure, and his age, and the weight of a man carrying grief and arthritis and a closing date in the same chest. Rest, he said. No more late nights, no 4-hour sets. Booker thought about the can of soft singles on his counter and the song that ended on a question and said, "I have one more night. After that, I'll rest." She went to see him. The room had been buzzing all week, the news that the old man was sick and might not play the last Friday at all, that the whole thing might end, not with a song, but with a sound system in an empty room and a piano hauled out on Monday to a stranger's house. At the end of her shift, she got the bus across town and walked the 4 blocks to Booker's house in the cold and knocked, and an old man with his arm in a sling opened the door. His front room was small and clean and full of music, sheet music in stacks, the upright against the wall, a coffee can on the counter behind him that she did not understand yet. He made tea. With one hand, they sat. "They're saying you might not play," she said. "They're saying right," said Booker. "Doctor says no. My hand says no. I sat at that piano this morning and I couldn't get through the thing I wrote. Couldn't get my fingers to do it." He looked at his right hand like it belonged to someone he was disappointed in. 19 years, and it ends with me not even able to play my own song. Maybe that's how it was always going to go. Maybe it's better. Empty room, no song, nobody has to watch an old man fail at the one thing he's got. And Odessa, who had given this man $3 every Friday for 3 years and never once asked him for anything, got angry. Not loud. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "You listen to me," she said. "I have put $3 on that piano every Friday for 3 years. You know what those $3 were. They were Junie's milk. They were the bus I didn't take. They were the lunch I skipped. I gave you the $3 I could least afford to give every single week, because the way you played in that empty room told me you hadn't given up. And as long as you hadn't, I couldn't either. You kept me going and never even knew it. She had not meant to say all of that. It came out anyway. So don't sit there and tell me it's better to fail quiet. You owe me a song. You've owed me one for 3 years. You're going to play it. The room was silent for a long moment. Then the old man set down his tea and reached behind him and took the coffee can off the counter and set it on the table between them and took off the lid. It was full of soft singles. Hundreds of them. 3 years of Fridays. You think you don't know what these were worth, he said quietly. Now I'm going to tell you, because if I don't say it tonight, I might not get another chance. And he told her about the winter his wife died, and the January he had decided to quit, and the woman in the grey uniform who put $3 on his piano and said the giving was the point, and how he had not quit that January or that spring or any season since, because a man will hold on a long time for the feeling of being seen by one person who means it. These aren't tips, he said. These are the reason I'm alive, every one of them. I never spent a single one, because spending them would have been like spending the years they bought me. His voice broke on the last of it, an old man's voice, cracked and plain. You didn't keep me going some weeks, Odessa. You kept me going every week. I just never had the nerve to tell you. She looked at the can of money she had thought was charity and understood, finally, what he had meant when he said she would never know what those $3 were worth. Then play, she said through her own tears. One more night. Play the song. You have no idea how many people are coming. He did not know. She had not told him about the 400. He thought still that the last Friday would be 20 regulars in a half-empty room. He thought she was being kind. My hand, he said. Then we've got 2 weeks to get your hand back, said Odessa, and 2 weeks to finish that song. He almost said the song could not be finished, that it ended on a question he had never been able to answer. Then he looked at the woman across his table who had skipped her own lunch to keep an old man playing, and the answer to the song moved a little closer, in the dark. The 2 weeks that followed were the kind nobody puts in a story because they are not dramatic. They are only work. Booker soaked his hand in warm water and worked a rubber ball in his palm and sat at the upright a little longer each day. Odessa came by on her nights off and sat in his front room while he played the parts of the song he had. And one evening, while she was telling him about Junie, about how the girl had started picking out melodies on a toy keyboard from the dollar store, Booker stopped and sat very still, then played a thing he had never played before, and bars that came down soft and certain and answered the question the song had been asking for 4 years. He found the ending on an ordinary Tuesday because a tired woman told him a small true thing about a child who had started to make her own music. He wrote it down before it could get away. It had taken 4 years and a coffee can full of singles and a girl on a dollar store keyboard, and it was done. Now Garrett, 2 miles away in his office, knew none of this. What he knew was that his old pianist was sick the last Friday, 8 days out, and the reservation book for the Magnolia Room had begun inexplicably to fill. He had expected 20 regulars. He had a full book, a standby list longer than the book, and a phone that would not stop. He did not understand it, and a thing a careful man does not understand makes him nervous. A twed of mouth, the host said, people saying the piano man was playing his last night, and it was something you wanted to be in the room for. Garrett, who had heard the man play 4 sad bars to a half-dozen diners, believed the room would fill on sentiment, and then sit there politely while an old man fumbled through a slow set, and that the override behind the bar would earn its keep when the energy died. He even tested it himself on the Thursday, standing behind the bar, touching the panel, hearing the room sound system swallow the air. Good, he thought. Insurance. He was a man who planned for the room to go quiet, because in his whole career, he had never once been in a room that did the opposite. Then, it was Friday, the 22nd, and they came. They came in their good clothes. They filled the 90 chairs and then the standing room at the bar, and then they stood 3 deep along the back wall under the coffered ceiling that the heat never reached, and the host stopped taking names because there was no more room for a body. The bank couple came. Lucille came with half her choir. The music teacher from the community college came with a dozen students who stood along the wall with the stillness of young people who have been told they are about to learn something. The retired teacher from 2 doors down came out at night for the first time in a year. 140 people in a room built for 90 on a rainy Friday to hear an old man play his last song. And among them, at a small table near the front, sat a woman nobody recognized, grey-haired and straight-backed, with reading glasses on a chain and a quality of attention that made the space around her seem to quiet down. She had heard about the night from one of the community college students, who was her grandson. She had taught piano for 40 years, run the keyboard department at a conservatory 3 states over, and sat on the board that handed out one of the larger music prizes in the country, and she had come as a favor to her grandson, expecting a sweet, sad amateur and a long drive home. Her name was Marion Voss. Odessa did not know she was in the room. Booker did not know. Garrett, who knew the appraised value of the piano to the dollar, had no idea that the most important person in his building that night was a grey-haired woman holding a glass of water she did not intend to drink. Booker came in at 6 through the kitchen, his arm out of the sling now, the grey case in his good hand, and stopped dead when he saw the room. He had been bracing himself for 20. He looked out at 140 faces, and his knees nearly went, and Odessa, clearing a table nearby in her grey uniform, caught his eye and gave him one slow nod, the way you tell someone, "It's all right, I'm here, go on." He set the case down. He sat at the piano that was sold, on the platform that was coming out Monday, and laid his knotted hands on the keys, and began. He played the old things first, the standards, the slow-turning melodies, and the room that had come on sentiment fell quiet on craft, because a man who has played the same songs for 19 years to an empty house plays them like prayers. He played for an hour, and the bar barely moved. Nobody wanted to miss a measure. Behind the bar, Garrett stood with his hand near the panel and felt, for the first time in a long time, that he had measured something wrong. The room was not going quiet, it was leaning in. At the front table, the grey-haired woman had taken off her reading glasses and was watching the old man's hands with a look Garrett could not read and did not like, because it was the look of someone recognizing something. Near the end of the night, Booker stopped and let his hands rest. The room, which had been quiet, went quieter, the full, breathless quiet of 140 people who can feel that something is about to happen. He found Odessa against the back wall with her folded napkin and looked at her a moment. Then he leaned toward the room and said, in a voice that did not need a microphone because nobody was breathing, "I wrote this for my wife. I started it the winter she passed, and I couldn't finish it because I didn't know how it ended. A friend showed me the ending a couple of weeks ago. She doesn't know she did it." He did not say Odessa's name, and he did not point. He only said, "Some kindness keeps a longer memory than the people who gave it ever imagine. This one kept me alive. This is the last thing I'll play in this room, and the first time anybody's heard it. It's called Friday." And he played. It is hard to tell you what the song was because it was only itself, and you had to be in the room. It began low and simple, 3 notes, almost nothing, the way $3 is almost nothing, and it built. It climbed and thought better of it and came back gentle, the way it had the first night Odessa heard him. Only this time the melody did not stop at the question. It walked all the way through and out the other side into the 8 bars he had found on an ordinary Tuesday when a tired woman told him about a little girl picking out her own melodies on a dollar store keyboard, and the ending was not sad. It was the sound of a man deciding to stay. It was 4 years of grief and 3 years of Fridays and one finished thing played by knotted hands in a full room, and somewhere in the middle, the retired teacher from 2 doors down began to cry without making any sound, and then Lucille, and then half the choir, and then the students along the wall who had come to learn something and were learning it in the only way it can be learned. Garrett stood behind the bar with his hand on the panel and did not bring up the house music. He could not have. The override was for a room that went quiet, and this one had not gone quiet, it had gone still, which is the opposite thing, and he understood the size of what he had almost done. He had nearly run a playlist over this. He had nearly hauled it out in a truck on Monday. He had measured the piano and the ceiling and the rate, and never once the room. And now the room was telling him, in a language he had spent his whole career learning not to hear, exactly what he had gotten wrong. The last note hung in the air and did not want to leave, and when it finally faded, there was a silence so complete you could hear the rain on the tall windows, and then the room came apart. 140 people stood up at once. They clapped and did not stop, the kind of standing that does not end on its own, and Booker sat with his hands in his lap, and his white head bowed and let it wash over him, an old man hearing at last what it sounded like when a room answered back. The whole room was on its feet, except one woman. At the front table, Marion Voss had not stood because she was writing something on the back of a card, and when the applause began to ebb, she rose and made her way to the platform and waited for Booker to look up and handed him the card and said something to him that nobody else could hear. Then she shook his good hand with both of hers and turned and found in the crowd the only person not looking at the piano, the woman in the grey uniform standing at the back with a folded napkin pressed to her mouth, and she crossed the room and stood in front of Odessa. "You're the one who told my grandson," Marion said. "He said a waitress was telling everyone." "That was you. That was me," Odessa said. "I just thought people should hear him. They should have heard him 40 years ago," said Marion. "Do you know who he is? He's Booker. He plays the piano on Fridays." The grey-haired woman looked at her a long moment, and something gentle came into her face. "Tonight he stops being the man who plays the piano on Fridays." She glanced back at the old man on the platform who was holding her card and looking at it like a man reading a thing he cannot quite believe. "I run a department at a conservatory 3 states from here. I sit on the board of a prize given every year to one American composer. I came to do a favor for my grandson, and I have not heard a room go that's still in 30 years. He told me he's never had a single piece published. That ends tonight." She put her hand on Odessa's arm. "And you should know. None of it happens without you. The first thing he said when I gave him my card was, 'There's a woman at the back who gave me $3 every Friday, and never knew she was the reason I kept playing.'" He said it before he said anything about himself. Now here is where you might expect the man with all the power to be destroyed, and he is not, because that is not how the true memory of the world works. Garrett came out from behind the bar. A thing had happened in his room that his whole career had not prepared him for, and the careful man in him needed to understand it. He waited until the crowd thinned, then went to Booker, and did not know what he was going to say until he said it. "I came here to close this room," Garrett said. "I'd already sold your piano. There's a truck coming Monday." He stopped. He had never in his life said the next thing, and it came out rough. "I was wrong about this room. I measured everything in it except the only thing that mattered. I'm sorry." Booker looked at him, an old man who had just played the best night of his life, and he had every right to say something hard, and he did not. "You measured what they taught you to measure," he said. "Most folks do." He nodded toward the back wall toward Odessa. "She measured different. That's the whole difference, son. That's all it ever is." Garrett turned and looked at the woman in the grey uniform at the back of his room and understood slowly that the entire night, the full room and the standby list and the conservatory board member at the front table and the song that stopped 140 people where they stood, all of it traced back to a server he had never noticed, who had given an old man $3 a week out of a wage he had been planning to cut. He did not call the truck off out of pity. Pity would have been easy, and the company would have overruled it, and Booker would not have wanted it. He called it off out of arithmetic, because arithmetic was his whole gift, and now he was finally doing it right. A room that filled to 140 on word of mouth alone. A standby list. A composer the conservatory would write about, playing in a hotel with the hotel's name on every program. He saw in the language he actually spoke that the warm thing and the smart thing had been the same all along, and that he had nearly thrown away the most valuable asset in the building because it did not show up on the appraisal. By Monday there was no truck, by the next month there was no cocktail lounge. The Magnolia Room stayed the Magnolia Room. The piano stayed, the platform stayed. And the schedule taped inside the host stand had a new line on it, because Garrett, who had learned the one thing his career had never taught him, put Booker back on, not for one Friday, but for 4 nights a week, with a real rate and a real contract and a small line at the bottom of every program that read live music at the Caro since 1962. True again now, because of one woman and $3 and a night. Nobody who was there would ever forget. That is the hotel's reward, though, and this was never really the hotel's story. Marion Voss was as good as her word. The card she had handed Booker had her name and number and 4 words on the back, and the 4 words were "The song stops the room." She published his music, not just the one piece. She went to his small, clean house and found the stacks of sheet music. 19 years of things he had written and never shown anyone, and that spring an album came out. An old man's whole life of unheard songs. The title track a piece called Friday that began with 3 notes that were almost nothing and ended with the sound of a man deciding to stay. It did not make Booker rich. That is not what this kind of story pays out. It made him known, and for a man who had played to nobody for 19 years, being known was a wealth he had stopped believing in. He bought one thing with the first of the money. He went to the dollar store and bought every keyboard they had, 11 of them, and gave them to the after-school program at Odessa's church where Lucille's choir met, and he started going on Thursdays to teach any child who wanted to learn, for free, the way somebody should have taught him. The first child in the first year every Thursday was a 9-year-old named Junie, who had started it all without knowing, by picking out a melody on a dollar store keyboard, while her tired mother told an old man a small true thing. And the coffee can. He did not spend it. He had told Odessa those soft singles were the years they bought him, and a man does not spend his years. He took the can to a frame shop and had every one of those 3-year Fridays pressed flat behind glass in a long frame, hundreds of soft-worn dollars, and he hung it in his front room where the upright was, and under it, on a small brass plate, 4 words, the same 4 the grey-haired woman had written on her card, because he had decided they were truer about Odessa than about him. The song stops the room. As for Odessa, she did not become wealthy either, and she did not want to, and the story does not insult her by pretending money was what she had been missing. She got to keep her job, a room that did not close. She got a daughter who learned piano for free from the best teacher in the city. She got every Friday to stand at the back of a full Magnolia room and watch a man she had once given $3 play to a crowd that finally knew what it had. And she got the one thing she had never asked for and never knew she was owed, which was to be seen all the way by everyone as the person who had held the whole thing up. She had thought that first Friday that she was being kind to a lonely old man, and that the kindness was small, $3 a half-gallon of milk, and most of a loaf of bread. She had been wrong about the size of it. The world keeps a longer memory than the people in it ever guess, and it had remembered every soft single and paid them all back at once on a rainy night in a room that would not sit down. If you have ever given a small thing you could barely afford to give and wondered whether it mattered, whether anybody even noticed, you already know the answer. Odessa learned that night, and you might tell someone about a kindness you once gave that you never found out the worth of. There is a last image, and it belongs to her. Long after the conservatory, after the album, after the truck that never came, on an ordinary Friday in the room that stayed, Booker finished his set, and the room emptied out the way. Rooms do, and Odessa came to the piano at the end of her shift the way she always had. She reached into her apron and set 3 soft singles on the corner the way she had for 3 years and would for years more, because the giving was still the point, and the point had not changed just because the world had finally noticed. Booker looked at the $3 and he looked at her, and this time he did not say she would never know what they were worth. This time he just said, "Thank you, Odessa." And he played her home.